what is causing the black, what appears to be seeds in the seed heads of some of our forage grass species. And to answer that question, I've asked Dr. Keith Johnson to join me. Keith, you've been scouting pastures and hayfields all season long. What are you seeing?
I have never seen the presence of what I'm identifying as ergot in cool season grasses like I have seen this particular year. And I've been at this a while. It seems like we find ergot invading where a seed would develop, maybe about every 5 to 10 years, but never have I seen as many occurring in the inflorescence or the seed heads of these grasses. And I have found it in many, many cool season grasses that are very common to Indiana. Things, such as tall fescue, orchard grass. I've seen it in quackgrass. I've seen it in smooth brome grass. And many times we think about this being in cereal grains, particularly cereal rye, but we're seeing it this particular year. And the reason I think we're seeing it is this is a fungus. The name is Claviceps purpurea, and it grows in wet, cool springs. Well, guess what we had in this particular year was a very extended wet and cool spring, and as a result, the fungus was present. We had the host plant, if you will, in the form of these cool season grasses, and then you couple that with the environment, we get this disease triangle that we talk about, and here it is. And, what we need to think about doing now really is thinking about the effects of ergot on the livestock, and it can be fairly extreme. And the other thing about ergot is the fact that it's been shown that the fungus can live over a year, up to a year. So what that then tells me is if we have a wet, cool spring this coming season, that we need to be on the lookout for this particular organism again in the seed head. So what we can do is think about clipping pastures to stop the production of the ergot in the seed head. We also then try to be timely with our hay harvest. And see, that's what's really happened this particular year is the fact that with the wet, cool, extended spring, we had the development of the ergot, and then we had really late hay harvest, and as a result, I'm suspecting that there are many producers in the state, because I have seen this in various places and locations north to south, that have harvested the ergot in their hay. And so we have this, and what is the effect of ergot then on the livestock that might consume ergot containing hay?
Well, so are you suggesting that our producers, go out and visually inspect the hay that they put in the barn?
Absolutely. I think that's really the first step that we need to take is to go to hay that was harvested probably in that mid-June or after time frame is what I probably would look for. And what we're looking at then is probably hay of not super high quality that was harvested for the first time. And look for these bodies. And what the ergot looks like is really what I would say in these grasses, it looks like a black seed, as you introduced the segment to, that invades the ovary, and that's where the fungus develops and it grows, and it looks kind of like a elongated mouse dropping. Some of these on different grasses have a little bit of a curvature in them. They look kind of like a horn, if you will. Mm-hmm. But that's what I would look for. And so, yes, I would go to your hay bales and just visibly inspect and look for mature seed heads that have these blackened bodies that look like, again, elongated mouse droppings.
Yeah.
So what is the effect of the ergot on the animal?
Well, the ergot alkaloids are accumulative, all right? So it means that if an animal consumes a large quantity in a very short period of time, we can end up with the symptoms.
Right.
But we could also see the symptoms when we talk about low doses over a prolonged period of time. And so one of the first symptoms that we see is, and there's two phenomena kind of going on. One of them is I get vasoconstriction. Okay, and particularly in the extremities, so the feet, the tail, the ears, and those kinds of things, But probably the symptom that the producers will see first is probably a lameness. All right,
Okay.
so these cattle are going to start to get kind of tender on their feet, and that could happen 2 to 4 weeks after initial exposure.
And in extreme situations, gangrene could start to develop if
You
we're
bet.
not wise about it.
And so the other part of that is gangrene, right?
Okay.
And so if we get into the advanced stages of ergot alkaloid toxicity, we could end up with kind of what we see with fescue foot, all right, where hooves could slough off, those things because of the blood vessel blockage that takes place, in those extremities.
Sure.
And so that becomes kind of a concern. Along the way here, one of the other things that's going to happen is that these cows are, if it happens to be the cow herd, these cows are probably going to back off in their milk production. All right, so if they're lactating and they're nursing a calf, and that could be particularly a problem with our fall calving cow herds, milk production is going to be compromised, and then calf performance is going to be compromised. The other part of this syndrome is that we could also have some nervous disorders. All right, and so it could lead to hyperexcitability. It could lead to convulsions and ultimately death. So it is a problem. I'm hoping that we don't have widespread, large amounts of alkaloids coming from the ergot this season, but I think it's something that our producers need to be aware of and be watching for. Okay, looking both at the haze that you mentioned earlier, but also really paying attention to the animals and particularly the lameness issue.
And what struck me is some of these symptoms that you're talking about sound an awful lot like what we experience from fescue foot or we experience with fescue toxicosis.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, very similar kinds of symptoms, and it's alkaloids, all right,
Right.
but different alkaloids,
Right.
all right, that are coming into play.
Well, and what's a little bit concerning is if we have high alkaloid content from tall fescue, in particular the species, we couple that with the alkaloids from potentially ergot, we're getting a double dose of potential concern.
Yeah. And our producers that have got orchard grass, clover, or orchard grass alfalfa, or brome, are not, we eliminate that fescue factor, right?
Right.
That's probably a good thing for those producers.
Exactly.
But those producers that have got advanced maturity for fescue that is going to have higher ergovaline, right? Alkaloid.
Right.
And then you throw that ergot alkaloid on top of that, and it could be an interesting situation.
Right. So, is there any treatment that we can do for ergot toxicity, Ron?
No, there's no treatment. Okay,
Wow.
There's no antidote. Okay, for this. So our producers need to be thinking about if I start to see lameness,
Right.
and some of these other maybe secondary and tertiary symptoms. The only recourse a guy's got is probably eliminate that feed from the diet.
Right.
All right. If we got low levels, I think we can dilute it. Okay. And one of the things that we're seeing, okay, in these really mature forages is not only the potential for the ergot thing, but also the low energy
Oh, yes.
and the low protein values for some of those forages, which is going to warrant supplementation. That's probably a good thing from the standpoint of being able to dilute some of this. But I should point out that supplementation is not going to eliminate the alkaloids.
Okay.
All right. And so that becomes kind of a key factor. I mean, if we've got a problem, we're probably going to have to eliminate the feed, and that's going to put us into a short hay supply, even a shorter hay supply probably. So producers need to be looking now, okay, so that they can make sure that they've got the feed supplies that they need.
Well, are there any testing that can be done? If I go out and visually inspect and I find these, I assume that probably we could have high amounts of alkaloids or we could have some present but below the threshold of concern. Is there a place that, or what do we do to test for the presence of ergot alkaloids?
That's an excellent question, and I've done a lot of checking around. Okay, and what I found is that the traditional forage testing labs
Right.
that we use for nutrient analysis do not do this test.
no.
All right. And so here's a situation where you're going to have to go probably to a veterinary diagnostic lab
Right.
that is capable of doing that. And University of Missouri Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory does do that. And the thing that I like about that lab is that they not only test for the ergo alkaloids, they also test for the fescue alkaloids.
Okay, very good.
And so I can do both, all
Right.
right? If I'm a producer that's got only orchard grass alfalfa or orchard grass clover, I'm probably just going to do the ergot alkaloid.
Right.
That's $90 a sample.
Okay.
It's not a cheap deal, but if you look at losing a calf,
Oh, wow.
okay, or reducing performance on all of your calves, $90 is a pretty cheap investment. For those producers that have got fescue, I would probably do the combination test
I would agree.
of ergo alkaloids plus fescue alkaloids,
Right.
and that test is $110
Okay.
a sample.
And I think you're exactly right. I mean, it does sound like a fairly expensive investment, but if you look at the potential concern of severe lameness,
Yeah.
you know, and all the other symptoms associated with the ergo alkaloids, and then you couple that with fescue alkaloid that might be present, that's a fair price.
Yeah.